Hey, and welcome back. It's Bible Scribe. Thank you for joining me. This video is about the book of Colossians in the New Testament and how it supports a preteristic viewpoint of eschatology. There are many imminent time statements throughout the New Testament, and I'm doing this video series because a lot of the arguments from the non-preterist camp against a preterist viewpoint is that they don't see the time statements, or that they claim there's only maybe one or two time statements, and that that's not enough to justify the position of a preteristic viewpoint of Christ's coming. And so what this series is about is going through the New Testament books and showing their time statements and inferences all through the New Testament, through all of the epistles and every book. We're going to go through as many books as we can. Tonight it's in Colossians. So I'm going to take you through some verses that clearly state Paul's and or the Church of Colossae's viewpoint that Christ's return for them was imminent and very near. So let's get into that. It's actually a slide presentation that'll help me kind of show you what verses we're talking about very clearly. So Colossians, imminent time statements that support the preterist position. The first of those is in chapter 1, Colossians 1:13, and it reads like this: "Who hath delivered us from the power of darkness, and hath translated us into the kingdom of his dear Son." So this verse in the first chapter tells us a few things. Number one, it's the book itself is written in 50 AD or thereabouts, and so Paul wrote this to the church in Colossae, and so we know about the time frame 50 AD is when this was written. So that tells us, it shows that Paul and the Christians he was writing to in Colossae truly believed that Christ had already established the kingdom and that they were a part of it, all right, by these statements here, that he had already translated them into the kingdom of his dear Son. God had translated them into Christ's kingdom. And this also states and makes it positive that there was no speak of a partial kingdom. There was no talk of a partial kingdom. That's another argument that futurists or premillennialists will give about their view of eschatology, that Christ's kingdom had partially come but was not fully realized in the first century. Well, this right here tells us that Paul and the Church of Colossae and all the Christians in the region all believed that it was fully realized and that they were a part of it. Otherwise, they wouldn't have said that, or they would have added parenthesis to explain that, oh, we're part of the partial kingdom of the current time until the new one comes in the future. But they didn't say anything like that. They never do. All right, so next is Colossians chapter 1, verses 26 and 27. At the end of that same chapter, he says, "Even the mystery which had been hid from ages and from generations, but now is made manifest to his saints, to whom God would make known what is the riches of the glory of this mystery among the Gentiles, which is Christ in you, the hope of glory." And from these two verses we can get a few points. The first of which, the mystery of Christ's kingdom had been made manifest to his saints at that time period in 50 AD. So this mystery that the prophets had talked about and that Christ had talked about while he was on earth, it was realized, it was manifest. And that's what these people were saying. That's what Paul was saying. And so it's just how it was. It was how they understood it. And they didn't say, you know, there's something that we're looking forward to. It's something that will come. They're saying it came. The second point there, this means the kingdom had already come. All caps, because it had. Third point there, this means that the saints were already alive at the time in 50 AD. So that word saints is used throughout the New Testament. And so now we can start to understand, we can get a picture that when Revelation talks about the saints, and when Jesus talks about the saints and the perseverance of the saints and the patience of the saints and the trouble of the saints And the epistles talk about that we know the group it's referring to was alive in 50 AD, and that's who it was referring to, not some ambiguous, unnumerable group from all of the continuous centuries and centuries onward. They were specifically talking about themselves in that time period. The next point, God was making himself known among the Gentiles, according to verse 27 there. He was making himself known to the Gentiles. This is a fulfillment of many prophecies in the Old Testament that went along with this last days prophecy of what Christ would be doing when his kingdom came, that he would make known his glory to the Gentiles through this mystery. And this mystery was the way he was going to now deal with the true Israelites and the Christians in his new kingdom that was established and that they saw as existing and that they were a part of. And that's why I have that note, see Old Testament prophecy, because it's all in the Old Testament, how the Gentiles would be numbered with the righteous Israelites as well. The last point there, the hope of glory is Christ in the believers, and it's not a rapture. That statement in verse 27 at the end, which is Christ in you, the hope of glory. He's saying the hope of glory is Christ in you. And he's talking, of course, to these believers in Colossae in 50 AD. And we can, by extension, because we are believers, we know that that's true for us too. But the reason I put this point in is because as I've talked with many dispensationalists about their eschatology and we've compared notes, one thing they say is that when they start to consider a preterist viewpoint, that because it takes away the notion of a future rapture for us, for them, that tears away hope from them. It destroys their hope. Well, my comment, and the reason this I think is important with these imminent time statements, is that their hope was in Christ, and they said it never should be. They didn't even believe that they were hoping in a rapture or a destruction of an antichrist or a millennium per se. Their hope was in Christ, which is exactly where our hope should be. So that's chapter 1. Chapter 2 goes into details that Paul's talking to the church about how they should live, how they should do righteous deeds and acts, and how they should stay away from wickedness. So that didn't have any particular time-based statements that would support a preteristic view. However, in chapter 3, the first verse is right here. If you then be risen with Christ, seek those things which are above, where Christ sitteth on the right hand of God. So this statement supports the preterist viewpoint in that it's saying Christ is now on his throne right then to Paul and these Christians in 50 AD. And this was reiterated in Acts chapter 2, if you go back and read that Jesus was on the throne of David and at this current time in AD 50, not in the future from us. Christ was on his throne 100%, had taken it, and his kingdom was full. So just another support for the preteristic viewpoint. Colossians chapter 3, now verse 4, says, when Christ, who is our life, shall appear, then shall ye also appear with him in glory. Now this is significant as a time statement because these Christians and Paul in 50 AD were expecting to see Jesus Christ appear in their lives. It says it right there. When Christ, who is our life, shall appear, then shall ye also appear with him in glory. Paul says you're going to appear with Christ in glory after he appears. And so these people were looking forward to this in their lifespan, and Paul taught this to them. So there's no bones about it. These people all were imminently awaiting this second return of Christ, where he was going to tie up some loose ends. He was going to appear in his glory, which means his spiritual risen, resurrected state, and not his human form, obviously, but they were looking forward to this. So these time-based statements in Colossians are just another reinforcement that all the things that they were looking for and that Christ talked about did occur in the first century and support the preteristic viewpoint. So that's actually it. That's all the time-based statements I found in the book of Colossians that were specifically time-based. And so I think that was, it's unbelievable to me always to see how for so many years I missed this. But all through these books in the New Testament, there are these statements by both about the Christians of the time and through the apostles and the disciples and Jesus Christ himself that said, my return is soon. And it happened in AD 70. He returned in power and judged the kingdom of Israel and destroyed the wicked from the earth at that time. And so we just have to recognize that these things exist. I'm doing this series to just bring them to your attention. And so be looking. I will be releasing more of this series for the different books in the New Testament as time goes on. Thanks for joining me. Like and subscribe. God bless.